Dark Retribution, The Guilty Horse. As the night draped its curtain over the battlefield of love, a terrible story of passion and vengeance began to unfold. It was a tale in which affections were quickly replaced by hatred, and in which love's devotion was channeled into a plot of diabolical revenge. The final effect was as shocking as it was sad. It doesn't get any darker than this. The couple's relationship was never calm. From the very start, there were constant fierce arguments. The wife always seemed to be finding fault and criticizing her husband, no matter what he did. Her words sliced through his soul, and the more he tried to please her, the more it seemed that she disliked him and what he was doing. Although he endured much, the husband never made a sound. He could not even remotely defend himself or complain about his dreadful predicament. As the days went by, nothing brightened his spirits. In fact, his spirits sank even lower as time went on. The husband thought to himself that things certainly could not get any worse. But they could, and they did. Horseback riding was what the wife really loved to do. Every evening, she would head straight for the stables and saddle up for a ride. This was her time to get away from everything, a ritual she held dear. And it was also a practice she kept up without fail. Months went by, and the husband meticulously followed his wife's riding routine, her path, her pace. Each day, he spent hours calculating and planning. In those first few weeks, he did not yet realize the intensity of his hatred. Then, as the weeks turned into months, he felt it was time. The man, who was tormented by his muted misery, channeled that distress into a sinister plan while his wife was asleep. He designed with meticulous care a remote-controlled apparatus that would, at the touch of a button, emit a piercing, high-pitched sound that was guaranteed to scare the wits out of any horse within earshot. This revenge-tinged contraption emerged from its creator's growing anger and resentment. Once the sinister device was perfected, he took great care in hiding it. He positioned it along one of the paths his wife often rode. The location was very important, because it would only serve his plan if it were able to attract his wife, something the man was almost positive it would do. The drama would then unfold, and by the time it ended, his wife would be just one more person to have perished in the mountains. The air was electric with excitement when the day finally arrived. His eyes followed her every move as she gracefully mounted the horse and rode away from the house. He gripped the remote control tightly, his heart thudding inside his chest, but it had to be done. While she got close to the concealed contraption, he pushed the button, causing havoc. The horse responded by rearing high on its hind legs, obviously terrified and showing the whites of its eyes. The path that had been so calm turned into a place of near panic. The response of the horse was instantaneous and severe. It jerked violently, throwing the wife to the ground. She fell in what seemed like slow motion and was in intense pain when she reached the ground. With his adrenaline pumping, the husband saw the impact and knew that this was the terrible outcome he might have expected. In unbearable pain, the woman writhed along the path, completely alone now that her horse had bolted. Shallow gasps of breath pushed from her lungs as she sobbed. Her pleas for help rang through the still air, but in the back of her mind, she knew it was futile. They'd disbanded in all directions. She only prayed her husband had gone off to look for their straying mount. Where was he? In the trauma of the moment, hope drained from her. Her world grew dim, counting in vanished minutes, as she wouldn't give up calling out to him. Despite the muffled sounds of her distress, her husband merely lounges on the living room couch in his newly acquired home. His eyes slide over the remote control that now sits on the table in front of him. It's awfully hard for him to ignore what is going on. The remote clicks. He adjusts the volume louder and louder until the annoying pleas for help have been drowned out. Now, he can finally enjoy a game. After several days, the guilt and regret the man felt were overwhelming. That the vengeful act he had taken was irreversible, and that its consequences might fall upon innocent people, these thoughts were consuming him. And as with Elizabeth, the aftermath filled his mind with a swirling quagmire of emotions, amounting to a personal, private hell. Imagine if I shared with you the secret of a black horse and a sky that turns crimson as blood. Within moments, you will be privy to a wild tale, at the heart of which you will find a pair of interconnected enigmas. We will start with a man, a husband, on the brink, and then we will try to understand that man's wife, and how in the end, she might appear to be the driving force behind the situation he now finds intolerable. Keep in mind, love and hate are often close together. Make sure you subscribe and back. Kick that like button with the power of 100 horses if you found this eerie tale captivating. A thorough investigation of the incident began, with authorities examining all of its aspects. The appearance of the husband's involvement, in particular, caused detectives to focus intently on him. They seemed convinced this wasn't an accident, but some kind of heinous crime. And if it was a crime, it sure looked to them like the husband had both the opportunity and the motive to commit it. Everyone was taken aback by the dreadful accident. Sorrow and disbelief were the immediate feelings expressed by friends and family in the community. Almost from the moment the event occurred, people began to speculate about what had happened and why. Though no one wanted to believe it, whispers of suspicion directed at the husband started to circulate, leaving almost everyone to grapple with the loss in those terms. The ethical and moral questions that the husband's actions provoke are deep and difficult to answer. He took it upon himself to build a device that served no other purpose than to frighten the horse, knowing full well that doing so had the potential to kill his wife. If we hold the husband responsible, do we do so on the grounds that he committed a premeditated murder? We can use this incident to probe some very human limits and decide for ourselves. The husband could be profoundly affected psychologically in the aftermath of such an event. He might feel guilt, remorse, and even, though he told me he doubted it would be this way, a certain amount of relief over his wife's absence. These emotions seem as though they could lead to significant levels of mental distress, a kind of conflict within himself that might drive him to serious self-loathing. However, a web that intricate might not lead to where one might expect. The husband could face significant legal consequences for what he has done. The things he did, which had a certain plan and purpose to them, could be seen by the jury as not just life-harming, but as life-ending. There is no way to go back and ask the wife any of the crucial questions that confront federally funded research on human subjects. But every way you consider it, what the husband did is wrong, and doing the wrong thing tends to have bad results, one way or another. The terrible occurrences highlight how terrible it is when inside a marriage there lie resentment and anger that have been allowed to fester. The tragic losses and the heavy psychological burden the wife carries are things that can never be taken back. This story reminds us of the important role understanding plays in dealing with and resolving significant conflicts.